Hello everyone, my name is James and I'll be your host for the 7th episode of REALink, where real conversations happen. REALink is a conversation series where we engage with our guests to explore various topics that matter in our society and the importance of staying connected with self and with one another. It's also a campaign to raise funds to support the work that we do in Lutheran community care services. Today, we're focusing on the theme of religious harmony because in Singapore, we collaborate with state courts in this service called Project Restore, where we work on neighbor-to-neighbor dispute cases, of which, of course, sometimes religious differences feature as part of it. We would like to bring this topic to public awareness as part of our fundraising efforts. If at any point in time you would like to support our work, and you can do so by supporting us on giving.sg through the link that will be shown below or the QR code that will flash occasionally on the screen. If not, you can find on the slide shown now. You will just need to turn on your camera phone function on your phone and scan the QR code on the page itself. Once again, thank you very much for spending your precious Saturday afternoon with us. To help us gain insights into this topic, we are privileged to have Bishop Terry Kee with us today. Allow me to do a brief introduction for Bishop Terry Kee. Besides being the Bishop of the Lutheran Church in Singapore, he's also a Vice President of the National Council of Churches as well as their Interfaith Ambassador. He has much experience in promotion on interfaith harmony and conflict mediation between people of different faiths, and has been involved as a council member of the Inter-Religious Organization. He was also a former member of the National Steering Committee of the Interracial and Religious Confidence Circle, IRCC for short. With his extensive experience in interreligious harmony, we look forward to hearing and learning from his insights regarding the issue of religious harmony. Let's welcome Bishop Terry Kee.
Hi, I'm Terry Kee, and I was asked to introduce myself a little bit about my growing up experiences and my involvement in this interfaith, conflict resolution, and so forth. I would like to say that I grew up in an environment where I spoke Teochew at home, Hokkien with my neighbors, watched Cantonese drama from Hong Kong, learned Mandarin and English in school. And when I was a missionary in Thailand, I learned to read and write Thai as well. And within the interfaith or interreligious experiences, I had an uncle in Malaysia who was a temple medium, close relatives who are Buddhists and Christians. And between me and my wife's family and the extended family, we had representatives from almost every denomination that we can think of here in Singapore. My mother is an Anglican. My wife originally came from the Assembly of God Church before she became a Lutheran. Her parents were baptized as Presbyterians, and her sister and her husbands are Methodists. And all this helped me to be aware of the sensitivities of different religions, both inter and intra-faith, and having to negotiate sensitively between them. The picture that we see in front of you, that is me, my wife besides me, the older person, that's my mother, and that is my sister, her husband, and my niece, all right, that I've mentioned about. And so I understand that, do you want me to perhaps perform something on screen as well? And that's a challenge to me because, I'm not so much of a performer, but I love music, and I had played or dabble in different kinds of instruments, and I love especially ethnic instruments that are not so commonly seen here in Singapore. And one of the reasons sometimes I say is that, a common instrument like guitar or something like that, even if you play very well, there are others who play better. Or you know of people who can play much better. But when we are using instruments that are new or unusual, even if you play a simple tune, people are captivated not by your playing, but by the sound of that lovely instrument. So today, I thought I will play an instrument common in Yunnan because it's one of the very popular ethnic instruments, but not so common here in Singapore. And that is called the Hulusi. And as you can see, it's made up of hulu and three bamboo here. I'll stand up and play a common tune here that many of us may know, so you may know how this sounds like. And you perhaps have seen this playing some folk tune, but I try to play a familiar Christian hymn with this. Let's try. Yeah, I guess you know and recognize this tune, Amazing Grace, a lovely song written by a pastor in UK who, before that, he had been involved in slave trade, repented, served the Lord, and he wrote this particular hymn as an expression, a reflection of God's grace when he was preparing a New Year Eve sermon. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Bishop, for performing. This is my first time seeing and hearing the Hulusi instrument, and I thought it was really so cool that you're playing a very familiar Christian hymn. I think it gives the song a very folk song kind of feel, and somehow makes me feel more meditative about the lyrics. I think for a lot of us, we don't know that actually Bishop is a man of many secret talents. This is just one of the instruments that he's able to play. But in the interest of time, we can only ask him to perform the Hulusi. But of course, we look forward to him performing publicly with other musical instruments one day, hopefully. Yeah. Let's get going on the engagement topic for today regarding religious harmony. The first curiosity that I really would like to pose to Bishop is on the reason why he wanted to start off on inter-religious work in the first place. There are many causes in the world, and even so even within the Christian faith. Now, but why inter-religious work for you? What's your motivation to go on this inter-religious work? Bishop, would you like to share with us, please?
Well, for myself, as you know, I have been a pastor and a missionary, and I have witnessed how religious conflict can be a problem, and how it can affect the relationships within the neighborhood and the community. And in the recent years, we saw a lot of conflicts that's happening, and some of that are quite serious, and a lot of them actually were so serious because it was accumulated over a long period of time with pent-up frustration, anger, and resentment. That all it takes is a little spark, and then the whole thing blow up, and it kind of get out of control. And for me, in a way, I stumbled into it because as the pastor, I had been sometimes called upon to mediate between the members of the families, for example, whereby sometimes this member and the relative that they had conflict with are of a different denomination or different faith. And later on, when I was serving as the president of the Council of Churches, there were a couple of times that they had called upon me to mediate between some tension between the religious leaders, a pastor who had said something that's offensive, and then I tried to mediate and bring reconciliation between the pastor and the religious community that he had offended, and in some cases, some religious leaders of another faith that had offended the Christian, and then they called me to represent the Christian faith to have a conversation with that person. And so, and as I began to do this, I realized that conversation is very important, and and to be able to do it sensitively, sincerely, and with the focus to listen, to understand why they are feeling certain way, or why are they doing certain thing the way they did, or what were they thinking, actually is already a big step towards understanding, and then from that understanding to try to resolve the tension on hand. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Rich, for sharing about that with us. I think what I hear from you is that really like given the fact that you really want to restore relationships between members of the church in the first place, and also given the fact that you are part of the IRO, it naturally extends to bring this out in the inter-religious work as well. So I'm just wondering whether you can share with us a short story about one of such work regarding how you mediate between different faiths.
Well, the one of the case I encountered was that for whatever reason, something that a particular church had published some years earlier surfaced and was posted into the social media of another faith. All right, and so the people of that faith, they saw that, and they were very upset, because actually this happened at the time when perhaps the religious sensitivity was not so understood, and people were less aware of what are some of the do's and don'ts in the interfaith relationship. And so that came up, and when the pastor was aware of that, in his anxiety to resolve that, he emailed an apology, all right, to the federation of that particular faith, and that federation refused to accept his apology, because they felt that just a simple email that way and using a very informal form doesn't reflect or show sincerity. And so the pastor contacted me and said that what should he do, or what can be done to resolve this situation. And so, because of my involvement and my relationship with the leaders of the other faith, I was able to contact them directly and say that this pastor is concerned about this, and he would like to. And I was wondering whether I can have an opportunity to gather us together around the table, and we can talk about this and to see how we can resolve this. And they said sure, and so that happened. And the conversation ended very well. The what had happened was articulated, and then how it offended the other party was also they had the opportunity to talk of why and how they were offended, and then we discussed what would it takes to repair that relationship or to resolve that. The pastor gave a proper formal apology. They accepted it, and then they went on to discuss how they can work together for the common good. In fact, the pastor offered the service of his family service center to mentor and help the newly employed director of the service center of this other faith, and they had also sensitively announced this to their own community in the social media, that the pastor had apologized, they had resolved that, and how it ended, and so that matter was resolved.
Thank you, Bishop, for sharing this story with us. I think it gives us a good, beautiful picture of what the whole process looks like. I can only imagine there's so much tension right at the start, but just because you come in and leveraging on your relationship and networks and your passion for interreligious work, the whole matter was resolved. Thank you for doing this work for decades, actually, and helping us to always achieve that religious harmony in Singapore. Now, I think a question that I have right now is, in terms of this topic, in religious harmony, why do you think it's important for it for Singapore right now? At this point in time, yeah.
Well, first and foremost, I think the need is here because Singapore is, according to a Pew research, we are the most diverse country in the world. with almost every religion represented here. And not only every religion, almost every sect or denominations of that religion were also represented here. And they make it a very diverse. And because it is so diverse, some religion we are familiar with them, some we are not. And as a result, we are not aware of all the sensitivities, our concern. And so it is very easy for us to offend unknowingly. And, one example is that sometimes out of good intent, but without understanding the other faith, you can do something of good intention and it's misunderstood. I've mentioned before, to somebody that, for example, some people who are educated in the West, and it was so common to bring along a bottle of wine when you were invited as guests. But then if they are not aware of the sensitivity, they may bring a bottle of wine when they visited a religion whereby alcohol was a strict no-no, and then that could be offensive, or for the Chinese, if you go to a conservative religious person here in Singapore and you give a clock as a gift, and as you know, the clock, the name has the same sound as when you present the clock, it's zhong, is like sending the person on their last journey, and they took that as a bad and insensitive gift, so to speak. And so understanding is, and trying to understand the sensitivity is one thing. The other thing here is that Singapore is a very densely populated area, and we live together in fairly close proximity. And because of that, the chances of us rubbing shoulders and interaction is also higher. And these two together, the diversity and the density put together, there's always the possibility of rubbing shoulders. And this can, over a period of time, smoothen and then, and become seamless. But on the other hand, the process could also be painful, and sparks can be created that can cause problem. And so to be able to have an environment whereby we are able to talk about issues and to resolve those issues, I think it is very important.
Thank you, Bishop, for mentioning those examples and sharing with us on these points. I think it's really important points to consider when it comes to this topic as well. I think the story, the energy you share, or the story you share about the clock and the wine thing is so classic. Like sometimes we have the best intention, we think that this is a good gift, but we unknowingly offend someone in the process. So I think given all the factors coming together, we can say that Singapore is like a melting pot of various religious practices coming together. And sometimes in the melting pot, during the process of melting, there's high pressure, high temperature, and this is where all the misunderstandings occur. And I think something I'm also curious about is we can't talk about religious harmony without mentioning about MRHA, which is the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act. It was first passed on November 9, 1990 to help the government to prevent friction and misunderstanding between this melting pot that we have. And there was an update last year in 2019, and I know that Bishop, you were part of the committee behind it. Would you like to share with us more about this whole process?
All right. I think the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act, when it first came out, it was actually to try to put up as a deterrent or as a safeguard against violence. One of the reasons was in the 80s, there seems to be kind of an awareness, and there are several different religions that is becoming quite perhaps active or in their outreach. And while it is constitutionally our right to be able to propagate our faith, but we have no right to demean or denigrate other faith. But unfortunately, sometimes in the zealousness of the person is sharing, they begin to perhaps compare their faith with certain other faith, and then begin to talk of the other faith in a very bad way, and this offended the people. And in fact, this is the least effective way in evangelism or in outreach, but unfortunately, sometimes it is done. And so instead of the person hearing your message and the goodness of your religion, they reacted to you against what you say about their religion, and and not only they resulting in them rejecting what you're trying to tell them, they may even reject you as a friend, and to make matters worse, it may cause tension and conflict between two communities. And so they had that to put up the act whereby they draw the boundary as to, and if any faith or any individuals kind of cross that boundary, they will be guided, counseled, and if there is still non-repentance or still insistent on their way, then the government have the book to throw at them and to call them to task. And but in 2019, we felt, I think there was a feeling that that is good. What can we do to encourage intentional engagement with each other, in reaching out to each other, involving with each other, and to promote or to strengthen the relationship between each other. So this maintenance of religious harmony, this expansion is more of talking about how we can promote that. So it's not so much of the act. At the beginning of it, they affirm the right of every person to practice their faith and also to propagate their faith. But on the other hand, it call upon us to be sensitive to the other people's feelings, and also to call for space to allow each other to be different and allow each other even to talk about their faith in some way. And further than that, they even talk about there are 7 things that we have spelled out very concretely, whereby we can do, every one of us can do to further strengthen our relationship. And you can see in the chart here, that among these 7 things, it include that we should and could participate in each other's life event, for example, and we encourage this kind of interaction so that we can, with greater sensitivity and understanding, to reach out to each other, so that we can, in spite of our differences, we can still be friends. In spite of our differences, we can still work together for the common good. And so this is what we hope to do with this particular act. So when you talk about this, so we talk about 2 things. One, for example, even if it is in the religious place, so when we go, we can consider in the sense of, we are encouraged to participate in the social activities, right, like life event, while we do not need to or not expected to participate in the religious rites if you're not of the faith. And there's also a call for people of the faith also to be sensitive to people of other faith, that if they come into your, let's say, your church or your mosque or your temple, to participate in the social event or the what you call the life event, there are certain birth or marriage or death, we need to be respectful, but while not participating in the religious rites. And the host also advise or encourage to also respect the other person's right, appreciate their coming, and not expecting them or forcing them to participate in the right of a religion that's not theirs.
Thanks for explaining to us about the MIHA in such simple to understand details. I think I really like the extension last year in 2019, because from what you're sharing, it tells me that we are no longer looking at just like preventing things. We're no longer just looking at how we can respond to incidents, but actually the extension allows you to go more upstream in terms of building relationships, being part of a common space with other inter-religious group at the same time as well. In fact, it reminds me of a saying LCCS when we come to talk about restoring relationship, which is that the more I get to know you, the less likely I will harm you. Sometimes we get very caught up about being responsive to incidents. We forget to go upstream to talk about relationships. And I think for the context of religious harmony, which you just mentioned, is like the more I get to understand and know about religious practices and why it matters to you, the less likely I will say or do offensive things that will harm you. So thanks, Bishop, for sharing us on that. Yeah.
And one of the things is that it's not only about the religious sensitivities and the rights and the rituals. Sometimes certain things you don't understand. Why must they do this? It's so noisy. Why must they do that? But then when you begin to understand from their perspective what it means to them, and why do they do it, even though it is inconvenient for us, even though we are encouraged to exercise certain measure of give and take, allowing them to have that expression of things that's important to them. Just as we hope people will grant us that space, when we have religious activities or rites, that might inconvenience them. And after all, it is not 365 days a year that those are done or carried out. And so we try to give each other the space. But besides that, there's another thing when we talk about relationship and the conflict, we realize that in many situations, sometimes the cause of it is not even religious belief, but it's something that is very personal. Take, for example, I like to use these illustrations, that normally if I were to just slap someone on the shoulder, hi, how are you? That's a friendly slap. No issue about that. But if the person had a fall, there was a wound at the back and it's not yet healed, it's still sore, that slap, that pain, that friendly slap, is very painful. And so the person may scream, ouch, and then may yell back at you. And instead of just saying, what's the big deal, just a friendly slap, we need to find out why is he reacting so strongly, and to realize that even though my slap was a friendly slap, unknown that he had a wound there, I caused him much pain, and the pain is real. And so that enabled me to apologize for that, and also to remind ourselves and to assure him that we will not slap him there again, knowing that he had a wound there, and so forth. And some of these are packaged even in religious things and so forth. Take, for example, someone growing up may have a very bad experience with a certain faith or certain ritual or certain thing. And then so sometimes when they see something, there is this kind of connection in a way, and then they react stronger than normal. And that's because of some of the unresolved past bad experiences that they have. But the key here is this: before we can even talk about harmony or resolving that conflict, we need to listen and to understand why the reaction, why that anger, or why that the violent response, and so that we can deal with that, so that at the end of it, both parties, in this kind of situation, it's not who is right, who is wrong, or who win, who lose. But at the end of it, it's a win-win situation. Both learn, both develop, and the most important thing is that conflict can be resolved, and they can end up being friends again. So that's what we're hoping for.
That's really a very good analogy to understand this topic altogether. I think really it just boils down to this, which is that sometimes what we see of others may not always be what is like for them. And if we were to just take a step back and just give others the space to actually be empowered to speak up in terms of what is like for them, why does this thing matter to them, I think we can actually seek that mutual understanding and help each other to be in this space to understand where we are coming from. I think there's also a part that I really thought that was very interesting that you shared during when we were talking in our dry run earlier, which is that it's not just about how they can come together to hear each other, but how they can help each other in the healing process as well. Would you like to share more about this, Richard?
Yes, because once you know the cause of the pain, for example, or the cause of the fear, and so forth, then we can begin to see how we can help in that painful process. So avoiding is one thing, but the other thing here is then how we can help. And one of the things personally I find very helpful, all right, and I like to remind people as well, is that sometimes we got unrealistic expectation of people. We just because that person is religious, they say therefore that person must be more perfect than me, lah. And if the person is a religious leader, then even worse, right? Wow. And I remembered personally, I find it to be an inspiration when I read about His Holiness the Pope, the Catholic Pope. Shortly after he was consecrated as the Pope, a journalist interviewed him and asked him, all right, Your Holiness, if you are to use one word to describe you, yourself, what would you use? And he used the word sinner, a sinner. And the journalist was taken aback. He said, no. I think maybe you don't understand my question. My question is, how would one describe you? And his answer is still the same, a sinner. And for us as Christians, we are sinners saved by the grace of God. And because of that, all right, and if he, the Pope, could regard himself as a sinner, not perfect, how about us as bishops, pastors, and just ordinary people, so to speak? All of us are perfect, not perfect. And because we are not perfect, there are times where we say things, we do things, all right, that's not right. And sometimes, even when you intend to do the right thing and say the right thing, sometimes they come out wrong.
Yeah.
All right. Or worse still, something that you said passed on by someone to another person and something changed or taken out of context and the meaning come across different and people can be angry with you and you don't even know why they're angry with you. And so one of the things here is this. When we realize that we are imperfect, we are imperfect, then we need to acknowledge that there is every opportunity or possibility that I may have said things intentionally or unintentionally that offend people, that hurt people. And when that happens, what do I hope for? I hope for grace. I hope for their forgiveness, right? And in the same way, if I hope that when I am wrong, people can be gracious to me, can I be gracious to others when they are wrong? So that's the first thing, to be gracious to one another, to give each other sometimes the benefit of the doubt, to give each other that space, recognizes that none of us are perfect. Yes, he has said that, but I'm not perfect either. And so let's give each other that space, and learn from that, and and then we can proceed from that. So that is the first aspect of helping that. The second part of it here is having grown out of that, extending to each other that space. And then we can then begin to ask ourselves, then what can I do? All right, to bring healing? What can I do to help? What can I do to be a friend? What can I do to be a good neighbor in spite of our differences? Take, for example, sometimes they may hesitate to come to your place for a meal. When you invite them, is because that religion may have got dietary kind of a restriction and they are not sure if the food that you prepare is kosher or halal or not, or vegetarian, because they are vegetarian and so forth. And so, on one hand, what do we do to ensure that sensitivity so that they can feel comfortable coming to enjoy the meal with you? And so forth. The other aspect of it is sometimes we can give each other the benefit of the doubt and the space, going out for a meal and so forth. Take, for example, you may be a vegetarian, your friend is not. you know. And of course, one is sometimes to be self-sacrificial, to be vegetarian for that meal so that you can eat together with your friend. But another thing here is that perhaps at the hawker center, you have your vegetarian and they have the non-vegetarian, but we can still be friends and eat together. You know, and so we can find ways and opportunity to and what I propose is upstream to create an environment, a culture whereby we can talk freely with one another. If there is something that you're not happy with, don't wait for it to be accumulated, you know, and then it explode later on, but to address those issues in a friendly, loving way, and from a very humble perspective. I'm so sorry I may not understand you, but you know, that kind of thing. But could you advise me, you know, in this kind of situation, what should I do, or how could I do that? You know, so that people, you know, when they see that you are sincere, you are humble, you want to learn, you know, you want to be sensitive and you want to be careful with that, they appreciate that. And so when you make the mistakes, they know that sometimes with the best of your effort, you still make mistakes, right? So they it's more of the attitude that they perceive, and then they will be able to be, and they'll be more forgiving and so forth. So for example, let's say your neighbor, generally, your neighbor is a very nice neighbor. You know, sometimes when they sweep the front of their apartment, they also sweep yours and so forth. You know, and so in your heart, you felt that that person is a good neighbor. But then when they have a certain celebration or festive celebration at home, it's a bit noisy. What happened? You tend to be more forgiving, right? You tend to be more forgiving because you know, he's a nice neighbor. So I mean, and this doesn't happen. So we give each other space. And so how can we, instead of just being passive and just endure, how can we be proactive and be a good neighbor? And I think since last year, MSF had also pushed forward this Good Neighbor Day on the National Day, and I thought that was a good initiative, but I hope it's not something just because MSF pushed we do it. But let's maybe ask ourselves, how can we kind of develop and be a good neighbor to our neighbors, regardless of whether they are of the same faith, you know? And then, and so if there is issue, how then can we converse, talk about it, and deal with it? Because in some situation, they may not be aware, like what we heard before, that by burning the incense, you know, you may have a child that is asthmatic, and that is a problem. So we can discuss, you know, how then can we do? So if you are pre-warned, for example, you may want to take your child out for the day so that that will not affect your child, or some other issues, you know, and to give each other that space, you know, and not because we are opposed to them or whatever. So we talk about for the sensitivity and to the promotion of the good relationship that we can have with our neighbors in our community and in our nation.
Thank you, Bishop, for sharing about that. I really resonate with what you are sharing because I feel that perhaps this is really the crux of the whole matter, which is the fact that do we know our neighbors? Do we interact with our neighbors even? Do we come into a common space with them so that we know what matters for them and why are they doing certain things without all these interactions, without all this getting to know one another and building of relationships in the community? It makes even very small incidents explosion waiting to occur. Yeah, and I think what you mentioned about all the various festivals, traditions, things that sometimes may not be intuitive to us in our culture, but if we were to come to common space and talk and interact more, perhaps we can even be part of this to understand and to know why all these things matter to them, and we'll go beyond just toleration. Definitely, we're not just talking about religious tolerance. We are talking about building really like inter-religious relationships and harmony about the community as well. Yeah, thank you for sharing on that. I really love that you help us distill all these things into very simple principles. I think is the fact also what I hear and gain from your sharing just now is that we are all imperfect, no matter how good our intentions are. If all of us can just take a step back and acknowledge our vulnerability before we go and engage others and have conversations with them, I think a lot of some of these inter-religious tensions may may actually go down and be reduced. So thank you, Bishop, once again for spending your afternoon with us. I find a lot of relevance in what you shared earlier to our work. As I mentioned earlier, we have this collaboration with State Court called Project Restore, where we bring participants together they are involved in neighbor-to-neighbor disputes, and of which some of these cases, religious conflicts feature for them. We bring all the stakeholders together, which of course includes the neighbors in dispute and other neighbors from the community as their supporters. We also bring together the town council, we bring together HDB personnel, and anyone. I think there was one time we even we engaged a Taoist priest to actually be part of the process to talk about matters pertaining to the Taoist faith. So though the work may not be easy, but such agreements can be resolved through acknowledging that we are all imperfect and may wound others unintentionally. And by taking ownership of the issue together, we allow everyone to come together to a common space to resolve these things that are affecting them. So on LCCS part, we are looking to expand the scope of service to the general larger public, and we definitely need your help through this financial support. If you are looking to support our Project Restore initiative, you can scan on the screen right now the QR code that appears on the screen. Just take out your phone, scan the QR code, you'll be directed to our giving.sg campaign. Any amount is fine, but we just really hope you can really support us in this initiative. If you make a donation of $50 or more, you'll receive a LCCS Food Trail coupon where you can get to enjoy discounts from 10 participating restaurants and cafes shown on screen. We want to give a big shout out to the restaurants as well, who have supported us in our REALink campaign. We hope that during this trying period, you will also consider supporting these local businesses. Thank you, Bishop, once again for being with us this afternoon for our REALink project and sharing your thoughts and of course performing your Hulusi for us. We really look forward to hearing that more and other instruments as well. In appreciation, we have delivered a gift over to you, and now is the time to open that gift. Can you show us on the screen what the gift is? Oh,
I was told not to open it until now.
Yes.
They say it's going to be a surprise, but having seen previous episode, I guess what it is. Nevertheless,
Oh, yes, I think Bishop is expecting this is the same few gifts that we're giving all our speakers. Yeah, but nevertheless, it's a nice picture to hang on your wall. So the gift is a jigsaw puzzle consisting of 4 different types of conversations that we can have to build relationship with each other. So on the jigsaw puzzle, you'll see the word collaborate, empower. Yeah.
Empower, engage, and restore.
Yes, correct. So it's also the name of the 4th series of REALink series. So the puzzle symbolizes the importance of connecting with each other, like how the puzzle pieces can connect to form a complete picture itself. And in line with today's topic on religious harmony, we also want to encourage you and everyone else to have meaningful conversations so that we can understand each other more in our religious differences. Thank you once again, everyone, for being with me and with Bishop this afternoon for our episode of REALink. If you want to watch the replay of this episode, you can always catch it on our YouTube channel or Facebook page. Stay tuned for our upcoming session on 14 October, Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Our next guest is Professor Paul Tambia. I believe he's not unfamiliar to many of us in Singapore. Professor Tambia will be sharing his perspective on breaking the poverty cycle. We'll be exploring areas such as assets building, creating opportunities to promote social mobility, and structural issues of poverty in Singapore. If you'd like to join us, please tune in that day. Thank you, everyone, and have a good Saturday afternoon.